All right, everybody. Thanks for your patience. This is the Hana Hou Panel. It's kind of like a "we're done here until we meet again" sort of thing in Hawaii. Here are 5 of our many speakers, and one of the things that I wanted us to bring up here is kind of to express my appreciation, but also how impressed I am. So I personally, I'm Jeremiah Grossman. I founded White Hat Security, CEO of BitDiscovery, and I've been to well over 200 InfoSec conferences over the last 20 years, and many of them obviously are going to be application security. I was mentioning to the organizing team that about our lineup of speakers, and I was hard pressed. I actually couldn't think of a single conference that would outdo this conference in terms of quality of speakers and content. I was just asking around, and I think everybody was overwhelmed by the amount of information that was thrown at them. Like, it's easy to get overwhelmed. And but we would rather that feeling that you're overwhelmed, like this is too much good stuff, than going to another conference and for it to be too superficial. So I think we did a really good job at bringing the right people together to talk about the right concepts. It's the intersection of application security and development, very defensive based, which is what we were going for. So I wanted to say a personal thank you to all the speakers who agreed to come up here, that traveled all the way to come here and to share their knowledge with us. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. So now that we've been buried in content, this is our opportunity to get a little bit closer to the speakers as far as what their core message was. So what I'm going to do is we're going to ask them a couple of questions, and then we'll open up the floor to you guys. But the first thing I wanted to do is just ask them to introduce themselves, the company that they work for, and what the title of the presentation and generally was about, just to refresh us, because I think we had like 24 presentations. It's tough to keep going. So we'll start on the left here.
Hi, I'm Dave Linder. I work at Contrast Security. I am the director of AppSec there. My talk was on adapting your AppSec. I think most of you heard that this morning, and it was focused on how do we adjust our AppSec methods and process for the changing dev space.
I'm Nikki Brandt. I'm from Slack. I work on product security there. You probably saw my talk with my coworker Fikri, who chose not to come up on stage. Hopefully I'll represent his work well here too. Our talk was Bulletproof Shoes, which was about an engineering project that our team worked on to automatically find and invalidate Slack tokens in the wild.
Hi, my name is Leif Dreisler. I work on the AppSec/security engineering team at Segment, and my talk was about delivering security training that developers love.
Hi, I'm Tanya Jenka, also known as She Hacks Purple, and I'm a cloud advocate at Microsoft, and I have a whole slide to explain what that means, and I won't bother telling you. But basically, I talk a lot about adding how do security people act within DevOps. That's what my talk was about, like ideas of how we could turn DevOps into DevSecOps.
We have one more late arrival. I think I started a little bit early.
Late for the party?
Join us.
We have another speaker.
More friends.
Katie.
Hi. Come join us, friends, so we can all be
cool
friends.
speakers are hanging out.
You ain't cool.
Friends.
We have room for you. We can get at least 3 more chairs.
It's
up
called
here.
the surprise panel.
Surprise.
Surprise!
Yeah, I see Neil.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, Neil,
If you want to.
Get your ass
but you
up
don't
here.
have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're not cruel. So we're
Scoot this way. We won't have a gap.
there's a chair over here for someone.
Yeah, we got one more down this end.
I was going to say I don't bite, but Manico does throw ice at me, so.
stage skirt. It's a serious thing for women. We concern about this when we sit on a chair. We're like,
Actually, let's turn the left here, Katie.
Yeah.
Introduce yourself, who you work for, and what your presentation was about. Very quick.
Surprise. Hi. I'm Katie Masouras. I am the founder and CEO of Luta Security. My presentation was about bug bounty Botox versus natural inner beauty and how to tell the difference.
Awesome. And hi, I'm Lexi. I work for GitHub on the community and safety team. My talk was about how to bring trust and safety into your work, especially as security engineers. And are we doing the big takeaway now? Or?
No, I'll have
Okay, cool.
Hi, my name is. Is this thing on? Yeah. My name is Daniel, and I'm working at yes.com, and we are working on an identity scheme, so I'm ensuring that that is hopefully secure. And my talk was on how not to use or how to use OAuth.
Hi, my name is Philippe de Rijk. I'm from Belgium. I run the company Pragmatic Web Security. My talk was about cookies, tokens, and APIs, but I'm up for talking anything web security related.
All right, thank you again, all of you, for coming and being on stage with us here. When you're the audience member and you're presented with a lineup like this and the amount of content that you gave us, it's a lot of times difficult to pull out the salient points and the takeaways from the presentation. So I'm going to ask one question, and I'd like for each of you to answer in turn. The first question is, after reviewing or listening to your presentation, or that you've presented it, what's the one lesson learned, or the most important lesson learned, the one takeaway you would suggest all of us bring back to our work? What's the one thing you want us to get?
Bug bounties nor penetration tests are equivalent, nor are they a sign of security maturity on their own. You cannot bounty your way to secure, nor can you pen test your way to secure. You have to build security in.
So I think from my presentation, I think enabling your developers to be very self-sufficient in both finding and fixing security vulns is probably the most important piece of my talk, because I think everything else I talked about will kind of fall into place if you can get that to work. Like I said, I wish I had a magic button for it, but I don't.
Okay, I think two themes for me from our talk. One, automate all the things. That's a great takeaway. And the other thing is that like really small seeming projects can have a lot of value in terms of security. Like the idea of something that invalidates tokens is not earth-shattering, but it's been a really good improvement for a lot of our users. So yeah, don't be afraid of little ideas.
Thanks. I'd say the big takeaways from my talk are, if you're going to ask developers to spend their time on something security related, make sure that it's relevant to them when you're building training, and then recognize people for their work. And I'm just going to repeat a question that I got from Tanya, which was like, how do you recognize people? And I left out a really important answer yesterday, but I tweeted about it, which is write peer reviews for people that do really awesome stuff for your team. It takes like 15-ish minutes, and that compared to the amount of time that they spent solving a problem that you didn't have to solve is like almost nothing, and it makes a big difference.
I thought it was also like be fun so that when people are risky, you can be risky together.
Yeah. I think our CloudSec guy in the back might hate that, but.
For my talk, it was about how security people, if we're going to do AppSec in a DevOps environment, we have to do DevOps too. So we have to change the way we do things or we will be left behind, but it's totally doable.
Awesome, I'm glad to hear that. The takeaway from my talk was that it is everyone's responsibility. Everyone, I want to clarify, who is working at the company. Don't put the responsibility on your users. But it is every employee's responsibility to help make your platform secure for all people, and that includes the most vulnerable people to online abuse.
So for my talk, I guess the lesson learned is, or just doing OAuth is not enough. OAuth is a framework. It gives you many options and many dangerous options. Look closely what you need and follow the security advice that is out there and the new security advice that is coming out soon, hopefully.
All right, and for me it would be that the web is a very complicated place. Everything hooks into each other and there's a lot of dependencies, and you need to be aware of all of these details to make security decisions, because if you forget a few of them, you might decide something here and open up a hole over there, which is the same with OAuth, I'm guessing, which is also basically a web protocol.
So one interesting takeaway as I was listening to their answers, there's a healthy amount of, we have to change the way we develop software a little bit, as far as the engineering teams do, but it seems like what they're suggesting is we have to change the way we do things and not expect the world to change around us. We're gonna have to change the way we do and integrate with everybody else's business. And I think that's a really important lesson learned because there's comparably few of us in the industry. There's tens of thousands of us, and there's millions of them. Asking the millions of them to change to suit us so we don't have to change, yeah, I don't think that's gonna work so well. The next question is, and we'll start at the end. So no doubt you've on-the-job experience, all the time that you put in that gave rise to your research, that gave rise to your presentation. What's the one thing that you're doing on the job or in your research that you would continue doing? And what's the one thing that maybe you would have thought would have been a good idea before, but you would never do again?
Related to our talk or just?
Related to your talk, in your research, ideally, but perhaps not exclusively. Or, so if you're not ready, if somebody else is ready, just jump in. We don't have to go in any particular order.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I would say the absolute best thing that I did in my entire career was join OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project, and then start a project with someone who I greatly admired. I could not believe it when Nicole Becker was like, do you want to start a project with me? I'm like, you had me at the fact that you're speaking to me. And it was just so amazing. I would say though, the one thing that I would not do is I've banged into different people within the InfoSec community, and I would say that most of them have been wonderful, but some of them have been like awful in a way that I didn't know like an adult human could act. And so I would maybe like try to learn to be less I just like open my heart like an idiot for everyone, and then I would just like try harder to like maybe ask other people's opinions of someone or ask them to recommend someone as opposed to someone just reaching right out to me. And I'm like, oh, okay, and then just like, who's next?
So from my perspective, I think, in my career and in my presentation, it just never stopped talking about it, right? Like, I've been in AppSec for a long freaking time, it feels like, and I've seen a lot of people come in and go out because it's tiring, and you just have to keep talking about it and keep that passion up. On the other hand, what I will never do again is be a no guy, right? Like you can say no, but don't just be the no guy, right? Like that's why security has a bad name. Work with those people to make a process that may work for them instead of just be, nope, we won't do it. That's it.
All right, so thanks for the time to reflect on this. For me, the thing I would definitely keep doing is assuming that I don't know everything, because I don't know everything. I know a lot about security, but even here I've been talking to Daniel. I had a bunch of questions about OAuth, even though I've been working with OAuth for over 3 years now. And it's like, yeah, how do you see this and how do you see that? And the same thing happens in training. Developers ask me like, how does that happen? I'm like, I have no idea. And then if it's a fairly simple thing, we work it out in class. We just look it up and try it out and we see what happens. And then we learn things. And sometimes it's a bit more complex and I honestly don't know and I figure it out later. But there's always so much learning going on and you see that everywhere. And I'm pretty sure the other speakers learn a lot of things from each other here as well. And that's definitely something I want to keep doing. And what I don't want to keep doing is in my career is sometimes you have these trainings that I teach out of compliance reasons, which by itself is not bad, but if there's no guidance from the company, if there's no context, no framing, honestly, that's not a fun way to spend my time because people are just sitting there because they have to be there. They have no idea how this applies to their job. They have no context. They don't know what to do with that information later on. And basically, you're just wasting everybody's time. Fortunately, it's not that common, but sometimes it does happen, even though I try to fight it as hard as I can.
So what I want to keep doing is, and it's something I learned, is to look precisely at things, because often enough you have many people talking about the same topic, but they have completely different views. They don't even, so when you want to defend against something, you need to know which attackers you are defending against, what you're trying to protect. And most of the time people don't know that. So looking precisely at things, you don't need to do a formal analysis for that, but just writing down in clear, natural language is helpful enough. What I would not do again, and I must admit that it's something I did, I completely underestimated the complexity for things such as OAuth. So there are still people saying it's a simple protocol. I wouldn't agree. It's really complicated. So, but it was so. We had this formal model, and then we were looking for some nice use cases, and we did 3 other things before we took on OAuth because we thought everybody looked at it already. There's nothing new to find, and it's simple. And yeah, turns out it was not. And that's why I'm here today. So. Yeah.
So the thing that I would say to do where you can, and we've learned this in community and safety, and I think it applies to security too, is find ways to say yes, and find like happy, exciting ways to guide both your developers and their users in like down the happy path, sort of. So in my talk, I talked about ways to encourage good behavior. It really helps you sort of shirk the reputation of being the team that always says no. So if you can like say a feature comes in and sometimes our first reaction is like, what are you trying to do here? But we do that in our private channel, and then we come back to the other team and we're like, okay, so we see some issues, but like here's how you might encourage our users to go down the happy path, and that's worked out really well for us. We've gotten good feedback on that. What I've done in the past a few times, and what I've seen other people do, and what I really would like us all to stop doing is, especially in online abuse, assuming that if you haven't seen it, then it hasn't happened. I've gotten some feedback a lot, some from this conference, some online, that like, oh, I haven't actually seen any abuse in this feature or in this context, like, is it actually happening? And I've even felt, I mean, I consider myself somewhat knowledgeable on the topic, and so when a new feature comes in, I'm like, I don't think that'd be a problem, until we hear someone who has experienced that. So turning that into a positive, just always listening to other people's experiences and assuming, or I guess not assuming, that if you haven't seen it, then it hasn't happened. That's what I would not do. Yeah, I would not assume that assume that a quote that I really love is, quote, everyone you will ever meet knows something you don't. Yeah. I think Bill Nye said that, so it's a really good quote.
Yeah, so I'd say the thing that we're going to continue doing is keep evolving the training, like as like kind of our framework or like library level protections improve, to highlight wins that our developers have had in the security space, so that they know like what the latest and greatest things are to use internally. And then one thing that we should have done better earlier is figure out how to make the training awesome for people that aren't in the office.
So in terms of what I certainly hope that we'll keep doing at Slack, for people who were paying attention to the graphs yesterday, the token nuker that we talked about is not a new thing. We've actually been running it since 2016. It's a really early example of a shift we're making overall as a team, moving more towards proactive security versus reactive security. It's really easy, especially when you have a small team in a really fast-growing organization, to only focus on that reactive work. I think that we'll continue to move as much stuff into proactive work as we can. It's better for our users, it's better for us as a team, it's overall choice. In terms of what I would not do again, there's nothing that comes to mind from the Token Nuker project. I think it was a really well-run project overall. But just a general, like, tying into my first sentiment of what we would do again, something that I learned in my time at Slack, when I first joined a year and a half ago, we tried to do security review on like almost literally every project, and that does not scale, it turns out. Yeah, so moving forward, we're working on being like a lot more tightly focused, having much more of like a a real at-risk score when deciding what we're going to do focused review on. So don't try to review all the things. Automate all the things. Don't review all the things. Yeah.
In terms of what I will continue to do are things like working with governments, large complex organizations, in helping them understand where they're prioritizing their security investments when it comes to bug prevention, first of all, and then bug discovery, ideally on their own, before they turn it out to outside users. So the work that I'm doing with the UK government has been wonderful over the past couple of years. We're not doing a bug bounty and we're not working towards one. We're actually building the internal capacity to handle bugs in a consistent way across the entire UK government. We're onboarding different departments, and our next publication together with the UK government will be onboarding guidance that we have used to basically normalize vulnerability response. This is kind of the dental hygiene of security and doesn't sound very sexy, not as sexy or alliterative as a bug bounty. But what I wouldn't do again is allow a government, like the Department of Defense, say that, you know what, it's great that you want us to build capacity, but what we really want is to be able to demonstrate early wins and success, and we believe that the media will want to see big numbers, and so we're going to start with a bug bounty. That was probably obviously when the DoD, the largest military in the world, says, yeah, that's nice, Katie, you've been helping us for a couple of years now, get ready, now let's just go out with a bug bounty first thing. I probably should have put my foot down, but I don't exactly know how I would have done that. I put my foot down, they put their boot down. I think I know, who's going to win that argument. But the fact of the matter is, that was a key inflection point in sending almost the wrong message. It normalized relating with hackers in a positive way and paying hackers for their work, which was wonderful. But it also normalized these ideas that you could just skip to the end. And that's been quite damaging over the past 3 years. So, and then one last thing that I would also have done a lot sooner is be more obvious about that need for preparation. It's always been my messaging. It's been consistent since when I worked for a bug bounty company to when I started my own company, but it was too subtle. I know, it's strange to imagine me being subtle, but in fact, I was being too subtle. And so now, that's why I'm calling it bug bounty Botox. I'm being very, very overt about how I think the model is flawed the way it's being executed. So yeah, absolutely, I would be much more overt about that. And yeah, please spread the word. Bug bounties aren't for everybody. Thanks.
One of the things I have to jump in on that particular question is, having been in application security for about 20 years now, one of the things I learned very well is that there's far too much in this industry for any one person to learn now or anytime soon. And I've been really personally trying to push the envelope, learning and teaching other people things that I've learned every single day for the last 20 years. And so that is the only way I found to not only just keep up, but even have a chance of getting ahead. And then anytime I didn't know something, yeah, I could read it online or in a book or in a white paper, it was just as valuable to know who to ask. Who are the experts, the world-class experts in some little slice of AppSec or security? People like these guys. So if if I want to know how to build or not build OAuth, as an example, somebody is a tweet now or an email away. And I've always found that the vast majority of the researchers, the experts in this space, are incredibly hospitable. They'll answer whatever questions you have about their particular research. So if anybody feels hesitant about reaching out to an expert and asking a question about what they've done, please don't. They are waiting for you, for people to ask them questions and show an interest in their research. In reverse, one of the things that impacted me greatly in my career is automatically assuming that the experts have all the answers. They don't. If they had all the answers, everything wouldn't be hacked every single day. So there is plenty of room for new concepts, new ideas, and new ways of doing things. And it's fine. 9 times out of 10, your ideas are not going to be right. They're not going to be accurate. They're going to be flawed in some way. And people in this industry we're going to be very quick to point out the flaws in your logic. Do not be discouraged for one moment. So InfoSec tends to be a very competitive place in ideas, but over time, the best ideas do rise to the top. And if you can make the grind, you'll do very, very well for yourself and more importantly for others. We can continue asking more questions, but I wanted to stop there and see if you guys have questions for these guys. If you do, just please raise your hand and then we'll call on you, stand up, and please ask a question. They're here for you.
I still have candy, okay? And stickers. So if you ask it, yeah, you're in.
Please.
Orange t-shirt guy.
If you could stand up, introduce yourself.
Yeah.
I like it. And we're paying the price because we have to answer the question.
We can't hear that.
Yeah, it's very, very
Because it sounds like Charlie Brown's mom.
Okay, what?
It's fine though. After this, you all can tell us what the people on that end.
Okay. I'm Jeffrey Goldberg. I'm lucky if I remember my own name from 1Password. And now after that, can I remember my question? Yes. The notion of we can't expect all the developers to change. We have to adapt to them. That's a common theme. But also in the notion of pushing very far to the left, is that also asking developers to change? It is, so I'm wondering whether we're failing to recognize that we are asking developers to change if we want to get as far left as possible.
Definitely it's a partnership. I think Netflix calls it the partnership model, actually, a thing that the Canadian government would do. At one of the places I worked, we would add an AppSec person to every major software development project, and then that person would answer all their questions the whole way through the project. So it's like, oh, you need a code review? Maybe I don't know that, but I'm gonna go find the person to help you do that. Or, oh, you need this? I don't know the answer, but I will research it with you. And like the first person that paired with me for that, we're still friends. She made me read a lot of big books, which I felt was mean at first, but eventually. So like software developers do have to change in some of this, right? Like it is their responsibility to write the most secure code that they are capable of writing. And then it's our job, I believe, as security people to enable them as best we can to do that, right? So giving them tools, teaching them how to use them, making processes that actually work, which I know is easier said than done. Does anyone else want to answer?
I have deep feels on this because I'm largely responsible for moving our security review process much earlier in the SDLC than we've done it traditionally. And it 100% is a change that you are asking developers to make, and it can be a really hard sell, especially if someone has been in a company a long time. They're used to doing, I get my security review right before I launch. Those people, it's a hard sell for them. And I think having talked to a lot of people who are in that camp, one way you can sell it anyway is to clarify that this makes it easier for them if it's done earlier, because they're gonna have to do it sometime. Doing it earlier means less work for them. It means their thing is gonna ship on time. You're not gonna have to block, because you will have told them not to do the bad thing 2 months ago instead of telling them right before it's about to go out the door, like, this has a huge vuln and you can't ship. And ultimately making it clear that like you're trying to reduce the amount of commitment that they have. You're just changing when the commitment happens, which is hard for a lot of people.
So I think that it's more around framing that you're asking development organizations to change, as opposed to individual developers who are coming into the organization. It's tough when you've got sort of these ossified developers who have just, kind of fossilized their ways and everything in your organization. But making things as free for developers, if they develop using a certain framework and you've banned unsafe functions, or you've changed the development framework to one that's more type safe, so they have less of a chance of making certain types of development errors just naturally. We're asking development organizations to change and to incorporate the processes earlier. And if we think about it, computer science is the youngest quote unquote science. We have a chance to sort of shift this culture, and one of the things I said was educating developers at the university level. Certainly I didn't go to school for computer science. I went for molecular biology and math, but if you do have a chance to teach them in the university, teach them secure coding practices, and there really aren't that many university programs that are doing that. So I think what we're asking for in the shift left, and shift these things earlier, is shift development organization priorities and shift our educational priorities for developers.
So I think it comes down to building that relationship and walking with them instead of telling them what to do, right? To kind of quote a few things that I saw this week, like, we need to start writing code ourselves. Like, it helps speak their language, right? Even if it's a few Lambda scripts here and there, like, they understand that, we really do understand what that change means to them and their process. So just building those relationships and walking with them instead of, forcefully pushing them somewhere.
Yeah, and I think to kind of jump off that, I think where Jeremiah was going with, we need to change is in terms of the way that we approach problems and recommend solutions instead of using tools that don't work for developers and only work for security people. You need to evaluate tools with a dual audience. We would be really hesitant to purchase anything that ultimately could or should be consumed by a developer without also running a POC with our development teams. And I think that as much as people hate the term DevSecOps, I think that with DevOps you saw developers and operations people start to cross over more and become more similar. And I hope that we'll see that same thing happen with DevSecOps, where you'll see more security people and developers start to kind of converge on the types of things that they work on and the way that they think about things. And that includes security people, or includes developers becoming more security minded.
You really earned your candy. Good job. Who's next?
Another.
No, sorry. Who's next? Over there? Okay, also, I have candy for you. Great.
Oh no, not Justin.
Yay, Justin!
I need to leave.
Hi, I'm Justin Collins, currently at Synopsys. Katie talked about this, I think, a little bit, but I thought of the question first, which is, we're talking a lot. How do we build programs? How do we build relationships with developers so we can get security in, all these things? But I'm thinking about, as Jeremiah said, there's not a lot of security people compared to the number of developers and compared to the number of organizations. Can every organization get a security team with quality folks on it who build this program from scratch? It seems unlikely. So my question is, what can we do such that every organization isn't starting at zero for security, especially for AppSec, but for security in general? Is there something we can do so that if I go and start a company, I'm not starting at zero? Thanks.
Actually, when I worked at Microsoft, one of the key things about educating developers on security is actually deliberately making the assumption that you've hired the best developers who know nothing about security and making no assumptions whatsoever that they have anything other than zero experience in security. And the reason for that was that you could do things like banning unsafe functions and some of the stuff I talked about, enforcing a secure development lifecycle process from the design phase. But if they weren't adequately trained, you were basically not really speaking in terms that they could fully understand. So starting pre-SDL, if you actually look at the Microsoft SDL, it starts with a pre-SDL phase of education. And that's actually how the trustworthy computing, whole company stopped writing new code. And the developers all got put through security training. And that was a radical move, but it was the largest software company in the world saying, we need to start from ground zero. So I don't think it's particularly useful to assume that your developers are going to come in with some level. Just assume they're at baseline zero and use your education programs to make sure that they go through and step through the fundamentals. I was lucky in that when I was a Linux developer 20 years ago, I had been a sysadmin before that, and I had been attacked. So I had to know how to attack my systems, and I had to know host hardening. And then as a Linux developer making an operating system, I had to know how to lock down that operating system that we shipped. Right? So I was unusual in that I had had practical experience that made me a developer who understood security and the importance of it. But don't make the assumptions that your developers have had any other job that would have put that context into full play.
Does one of you want, I feel like, no? Oh. Okay. Go.
All right. So what I think is important is not every organization needs to build all of that security knowledge in-house. So what I think is really important for developers is to know a baseline of security. So they should at least be aware of some of the basics and how to handle things. But the most important thing a developer can learn, or any person can learn, is to know when they don't know something. And when you don't know something, you go ask. And in a big organization, you have security champions, so you can go ask your teammate, like, hey, how can I do this? And if they don't know, it gets pushed up the chain until you reach a security team, and if they don't know, they should find someone else who knows. But for smaller organizations, that's not always feasible, but this knowledge is available. You have plenty of people offering all kinds of security services. So what you can do is, if a developer knows, like, hey, I don't know something, if the organization supports the fact that you don't know, we probably need to know before we implement this, or we're going to mess it up. So let's go ask, or let's go find someone who does know. And I can imagine not every developer needs to be an OAuth expert to know all of these intricate details, but they should at least realize, if I move this on this OAuth diagram to that component, I'm probably changing something. I have no idea what the impact is. I should go ask Daniel, like, hey man, I'm doing this, is that okay? And he's probably like, yeah, or no, I don't know. And this leads to discussions, and that's essentially the whole point, that you reach a point where somebody can give you the answer. And to be honest, sometimes nobody's going to be able to give you the answer, and that's when you start writing best current practices for OAuth and stuff like that. And even within that community, the experts don't necessarily agree, because everybody has their own different view, and you need to reach a consensus. And I think you can corroborate that. It's not that simple, but pushing this up towards more knowledgeable people, that's, in my opinion, the best security reflex you can develop. And that's what I do when I don't know something, and what everybody else should be doing as well.
When I launched my first AppSec program, so I was working at a Canadian government department. They didn't have one. And I was actually on the dev team, but I was obsessed with security. I was really interested and I had hired hackers to come in, secure code reviewers and all of this stuff, and I was in charge of remediation and all of these things. I kept reporting incidents to security, and eventually I joined the security team. So then I was the incident manager. And then once I had managed a whole ton of incidents, I took them, so I love metrics, I'm so obsessed with data. And then I broke them into 5 different categories, and then I showed them financially how much it cost, all the AppSec incidents we had. And I was like, I can solve all of these. And they're like, you know what, there's 5 months left in your contract. Fill your boots. This is a thing we say in Canada that means go do it. And I just realized, like, no one's going to know what that means. Okay. Yeah, Matt, that's right. Canadians represent. But so then the first thing I did was I had a little lunch and learn. So I made a safe area for them to go smash things. And it was like the first time I did public speaking. I'm like, hi, everyone. And everyone's like, hi, Tanya. So they all know me, right? And I was like, so there's this little tool called Zap, and we're going to smash things. And then I was like, I want all of you to just run this on your web apps, and like it's going to be like a game. And then I'd run around and high-five them. And we made like a little graph of like, if you find this, if it's public, you have to fix it. If you find that, if it's like not public, you don't have to. And we just like kept encouraging our relationship more and more. And like I had hated the security team when I was on the dev team. I actually walked up to them and told them to fuck off to their faces once. And I'm not a person that does that. I was just like we would run the election and they had gotten in my way in a big time. I'm like, nothing stops me. I will go around you. I was so pissed. And so they're my friends still, surprisingly. And eventually I was all of their bosses, so things worked out, right? But like, we had this really bad incident and we told everyone what it was. And I felt so embarrassed to admit imperfection, but that got so many more developers interested. And I just kept, like, every time we learned a thing, I'd be like, I'm gonna have a little lunch and learn. Guess what, everyone? I made cookies. And like, I do bribes. I'm like a kindergarten teacher just waiting to happen. And like, I would just like bring them in with like honey instead of going and slapping their hands, which is what the previous security leaders had done. And I was like, you know, if like you're having this thing, can like I come over? Can we like threat model it? What does that mean? I'm like, it's evil brainstorming. We're just gonna be like, if I was gonna hack this, how would I hack it? And I just tried to treat everyone as though they were doing the absolute best that they knew how to do. And like with respect and with gentleness and kindness, and like I really, because that's what I wanted to help, right? And
then I didn't seem scary. And I wasn't the big bad incident manager. And it's like, oh, Tanya's a nerd. She's a nerd like us. Like, I'm like, oh, do you need help fixing that? Like, let's go do it. And like, if someone was excited about security, I'm like, you're my guy. And I would like give them a book and do all these things. And we just started this culture of like, it's cool, it's fun. Like, the security team's nice. We'll bring you cookies and teach you things. And like, slowly, like, and then eventually my contract was over and I had to leave. But like, their security posture went up like this. Like, they're opening up legacy apps and they're like, I smashed the crap out of this, Tanya. I found like 20 of this. I'm gonna fix it this week. And like, just like, at one point, like I was at my desk and I got this email and then I ran across the floor and then I high-fived this guy and then I ran back to my desk and like the chief information officer was like, what the fuck? And I was like, that is more important than you understand, dude. Like, he just kicked the crap out of Zap. Like, he found nothing and like he did this and the guy's like, just keep doing it. So that's one approach that you could take. Thank you.
The question kind of reminded me of a conversation that I had, probably 8-10 years ago now with the CISO over at John Deere, and it was they had something like 10,000 developers or something like that, and it was at the time where, if you're familiar with Gary McGraw's work on the BSIM model, where they studied high-performing software security teams at various companies, and they said about 2% of the 2% of your developer pool should be software security pros. So I was doing the math with the CISO in my head, and I go, okay, if you have 10,000 developers, you're gonna need, what's the number there, 200 software security people. So he goes, I have to hire 200 software security people. He goes, I'm having trouble even hiring one in a competitive labor market. Like, we're a large Fortune 500 company, but you want us to compete for talent against Google and Facebook and Uber and Salesforce and everything like that. So he goes, that's just not going to happen. So what he decided to do instead of like heavily compete in the labor market, he decided to start investing in their own developers and making the developers and converting them into software security professionals, because it was really the only way. And someone like Tanya there is a perfect example of that, how an organization can do that. You can start with one, and they start teaching other developers the core philosophies of software security. And that actually works quite well for a number of organizations. The only challenge that they have later down the road is those people end up being in extremely high demand, so then you have to also work to keep them. Next question, please.
I have more candy. Come on.
I'm sorry?
I have stickers too, not candy.
While you guys are thinking of a question, one of the things
We might be, I don't know.
One of the things that helps a lot, obviously, is leave your arrogance at the door and don't think that even obvious mistakes are obvious to your audience. And I think I've said it this way before. It's not about calling their baby ugly. It's about saying that it had some really interesting features, right? So just a little empathy goes a long way.
Nice. I love it.
Yeah, so I think another important area of making it so that a company doesn't need so many security people to do a good job in security is focusing on things at like the language or framework level that make mistakes really, really difficult, if not impossible. I can count the number of times we've had XSS successfully reported to our bug bounty on one hand. And it's because our developers, before we had any security people, decided to use React because it was cool and Facebook was doing it. And React makes XSS really difficult. And so we have not had an XSS problem. We've not had a CSRF problem. We've not had a SQLi problem. And then developers internally have written things to protect us from authorization issues and from SSRF issues. And because a handful of developers wrote those things, now everyone else just gets to benefit from that. And they have to be like kind of aware of what those things are, but generally they're pretty safe from falling into those traps. And so I think that that's the way that at least AppSec moves forward the fastest, is making it so that people don't even have to know what these things are because it's so hard to make these mistakes.
What other questions do we have from you guys? Yes?
Yes.
The question was, is it more difficult to hire security professionals or converting developers into security professionals? I'm just repeating it for the audience, not answering. You answer.
If you would have asked me 10 years ago, I would have said converting developers, but I think we've shifted and we've had to. It's definitely hiring a security-focused person, probably mostly because of the market. I mean, the market's insane. I mean, I was in consulting for how many years, and the resumes that would come in, I mean, people are job hopping every 6 to 9 months. And they're doing it because people are throwing ridiculous sums of money at them. So at some point, we had to make that shift into, all right, developers are better. They're more passionate. They already understand code. It's very easy to train them in the security side, if you will.
Yeah, I would say it's a lot easier to train developers who are willing to learn about security than it is to convert security people into having understanding of the realities of development and shipping stable code. Absolutely. I would say it's easier going that direction.
Actually,
I have a question if you're looking for questions.
just give me 1 second.
Sure.
I want to use that point here, the market dynamics. So let's take your one number from your presentation. I think you said something like 23 million developers, give or take. If we take Gary McGraw's numbers for how many software security people we need in the world, let's say 2% of the 23 million, that's 460,000 software security people we need. Look around the room here, how many we got?
Pretty close.
Okay. So now if these companies are going to need to hire software security people, and they do and they are, there's no way, there's just not enough people to go around. So I don't even know if it's a choice. We're going to have to invest in the developers that already exist for most organizations because the labor pool is just not there. So great job security for us, salaries will go up, we'll have great job options, and that will last for a while. It's the companies that need software security people that are going to be put in a tough spot. Jen, please.
I want to comment on Leaf. Leaf is saying that they've done some framework work where developers can just write code with minimal knowledge and still do secure. And I don't believe you, Leaf. I think that's such a marketing-like story that I call bullshit on, because the reality is, even with some of the best frameworks we have in the world today, among the sharpest teams of developers are still writing vulns against these frameworks. So I think the opposite is true. Even with the best modern frameworks that we have in the world today, with some of the best teams tuning them, developers without knowledge make big mistakes easily. So I'm skeptical of what you have to say. And
sure.
The second part of my question is, why do developers using modern frameworks get so many problems with them? Why do we not have automatic security in modern frameworks that most developers use today?
I think the question I was answering, I don't know if this is the one that was asked, was how do you have a reasonably good security program with very minimal or no security people? Is that?
So then Jim just made a flat-out statement that what you were saying was bullshit. It wasn't really a question. I didn't see a question.
That was the first part of my comment. No, so I'm kind of adding to it as well.
I meant Justin's question.
What I'm hearing from you is a developer can just start writing code to a certain framework without needing to know security. That's the thing that I was reacting to. That was the implication that I heard from that. And so I would love to hear more about what you did to your frameworks to make them so resilient to these common security issues. And second, is a general question, why are the modern frameworks that developers are using today require special knowledge and they just can't use them and get automatic security? Those are my two questions.
So, yeah, the answer I was providing is, how do you move security forward with minimal security people at a given company? And I think you need to make it as safe as possible by default for developers to write secure code. And I was giving an example of React, which, historically, XSS has been in the OWASP top 10 forever. And even with no security people at Segment, in the time that I've been there, I think we've found 4 instances of XSS.
You said 5 when we were outside.
Sure,
So
4 or 5.
Let's go 5.
I mean, still, single-digit XSS numbers is is pretty good, and that was written by people that, for the most part, probably didn't know what XSS was.
And I believe that. I think that is very impressive. That is very impressive.
And I think another example is our SSRF protections are something that our SRE team built at the container level that inspect all outgoing network traffic and resolve every domain at the container level and make the IP connection first after checking against the blacklist of internal IP addresses, and then they'll make the connection to whatever the domain is over that same IP connection. And so that makes it impossible, as far as we know, for somebody to fall victim to SSRF or DNS rebinding at segment. And it's something that we talked about in our trainings. It's something that somebody from our SRE team built, and now anybody else who is interacting with like host names or IPs that are user provided, they're still supposed to do some checking to make sure that that stuff isn't taking place, but there's also that safety blanket, you know, to make sure that we don't have any problems, because it's something that is, as far as we know, something that you can't bypass.
The overwhelming technical nature of your answer makes me actually believe you now. So that's a real.
Let me jump.
That's a legit answer. Can you answer the second part of my question? Then I'll shut up for real. Why
what
do
was the
all the
second part?
modern frameworks in the world today? Why do I not get automatic security in most frameworks that are out there today?
I mean, I think like anything that is a complex issue, it takes time. And I think that frameworks generally are moving in the correct direction. And I think that if you look at your average framework or your average web app that's getting built with like the latest tech now versus 5 versus 10 years ago, it's like, do you think things, like how much better do you think they are? I'd say probably a lot. Like I was doing pen testing 5 years ago, and it's like we would find XSS on literally every app. It was like weird if you didn't find XSS, or like you just assumed you missed something. Yeah, it's like, where's the XSS on this app? And now, you know, we just have to watch out for like JavaScript URIs and dangerously set inner HTML. And like, if you find something other than that, it's like, we're super impressed. Like, we would love for you to report something like that to our bug bounty, because we would have no idea what that is.
Oh, there's another like 12 React areas. Do you pay well in your bug bounty, or?
Yeah.
Money isn't everything. Money isn't everything.
I'll remember that when we're negotiating rate with your company there, Kate.
Oh, I cost what I cost, take it or leave it. Anyway, right? So here's an answer to your question that takes our history of our industry into account. I mentioned computer science is young. How old is Google?
How old is, I'm sorry?
The company, how old is Google? 20?
1998, yeah.
21? Google's old enough to drink now? Why do you think we have no code maturity as an industry? Come on, Google is 21. They only created Chrome, what, a decade ago? You know, I wrote Symantec's vulnerability disclosure policy in 2005. I wrote Microsoft's in 2010. When we think about all of these frameworks that are coming into play, it's not the first attempt that the software industry has tried to make it easier to write secure code or hard to write insecure code. Is anyone old enough to remember Plan 9? Hey! All right, these are your drinking, but buy these people drinks. Wait, raise your hands again. Who remembers Plan 9?
2.
2 people.
3.
We are old enough to be your great-grand uncles and sisters.
What is Plan 9?
Okay, it was an operating system that was designed with a security model that was supposed to actually ensure, like, actual security assurance at every layer. You know what happened to it?
No one used it?
Not that no one used it. No one used it because app developers were like, you know, how to write code for this thing. It was commercially not viable. What's viable commercially is code you can write fast, scripting languages you can write fast. So why have we not solved this problem? Because we want stuff fast. And we want more developers to be able to like fall off into, you know, a half-a-day coding or scripting tutorial on YouTube and then just suddenly be able to write code. And let me tell you, so Jorge talked yesterday, is Jorge in the room still? He's probably like scuba diving now. But Jorge was talking from Microsoft about the multi-party vulnerability coordination that Meltdown Inspector, you know, had to do. He mentioned MSVR, Microsoft Vulnerability Research. I started that program in 2008. That is how long Microsoft has had the capacity to deliberately do multi-party vuln coordination. So I'm like giving you the history answer. Why haven't we fixed it? Because we're all still pretty new.
It's funny when your question there was pretty funny. It's always historical. We're all very new at this. It hasn't been that long. I mean, when I got into space, web security wasn't a term, and that was that long ago. I'm sorry, were there other answers that you want?
I was just going to say, because it's really fucking hard. I mean, how long have we been dealing with SQL injection, right?
Since 98, right?
Christmas Day, 98.
Right? I mean, I think that's really, it's hard. You know, and some of these frameworks like React, I mean, they're really good at a couple of things and didn't even address others, right? So
Yep.
it's just hard.
I want to quickly jump in here. So I kind of agree with the answer that the framework is not the solution, but it helps a lot. So what you have with these frameworks is that they reduce the amount of mistakes you can make. Yes, you can still write React code that is vulnerable to cross-site scripting. If you use things like Angular, I'm more of a fan of Angular because they do more than the other frameworks. They not only escape output, they also offer sanitization, out of the box, enabled, no mistakes. You just do what you're used to do as a developer and you have secure code. Can you screw it up? Yes, of course you can. But to screw it up, you'll have to make a mistake, you have to, you have to do specific things, and you can easily scan for these specific things. The function in Angular to make a mistake is called bypass security trust HTML. As a developer, they called it, everybody's laughing like, come on, that's funny. You know why it's called that way? Because in Angular 1, it's called trustless HTML. You find sanitizers on Stack Overflow using the function trust as a sanitizer, but it doesn't sanitize anything. It simply bypasses the framework's protection. So now they said, let's call it bypass security trust HTML, or dangerously set in HTML and React, so that if somebody copy-pastes this, you see like, whoa, what is this? If as a developer, the word bypass security doesn't trigger a bell, I'm kind of inclined to say you need to find a different job. I actually tell this to developers. Seriously. But developers don't want to write insecure code, they just don't want to read through all the documentation to figure out, is this okay or not? They just want something they can easily understand. And a framework, why don't the framework solve this? Because the moment you start solving these things, Angular does a lot of these things very correct. And many people don't like it because it forces them to follow the Angular way of doing things. And that's not maybe what you're used to doing, not what you like, or doesn't fit your situation. And then you have the lighter frameworks. React is kind of a UI library. They call it themselves. They don't do sanitization by default. Why? Because it's out of scope for them. They literally say, like, we only try to offer this part of the framework or this part of the ecosystem, and we're fine by doing that. Which, again, implies that the developer requires some knowledge to figure out how to do things securely. And that you don't have cross-site scripting is applaudable, that's pretty good. But it also requires some knowledge about the framework. It requires teaching developers to not misuse this dangerously set in HTML and stuff like that. But it's never going to be a total solution. I mean, the Redux documentation had a cross-site scripting flaw in the actual docs. That was a major React security problem. If you did server-side rendering, because the people writing that weren't aware of some specific escaping problem, and it actually caused cross-site scripting. So there's always going to be these things, but it's a lot less. Before that, if you're building GSP pages, you had thousands and thousands of outputs and ways to introduce cross-site scripting. And now in React and Angular, you have 1, 2, okay, you have 3 or 4. And we can scan for those. And we can educate developers. And there's less they need to know about these things. And that is definitely the way forward. And that's definitely a big improvement that we're seeing. So yes, secure defaults are the solution, but it's going to take some time to get there on a universal scale. But I think we're improving a lot. And the fact that your application is a lot more secure from the get-go is definitely the example. That's the way of going forward, absolutely.
So we are 4 minutes from lunch, and there's no way I'm keeping you from that.
There were 2 questions at the back that have been waiting.
I was going to give a...
Okay, good.
So
Jason and
if we
White.
could get one more question for the audience. I mean, for the audience, for the
Jason,
panel.
the guy in the white t-shirt's been like waving his arm for a really long time.
So kind of related to Justin's question, as somebody who made this transition, we're known for, hey, we need more security people. Also, we're known for, no, you don't have 5 years experience, we can't hire you.
Oh my God, yes.
Right, we're all very open. I mean, as Jeremiah noted, we're all very open to sharing. But when it comes time to hire you and pay you money, it's a different story. So I'd like to hear thoughts, anecdotes, successes in this arena of bringing people in, fostering them, how we build that talent. Thank you.
Before we answer this question, which of you is responsible for hiring other people? Katie, Edith there?
I'm not responsible.
But you're one of the people that was quote unquote hired, from internally. So please speak from that perspective.
I had a professional mentor, and he advocated for me. I had more than one man who was like, one of them even said, I won't take this contract unless Tanya's coming. I won't come. And they're just like, I'm not going unless she's coming too. Because they saw my potential and they knew I was going to go there. So I've started this program called Mentoring Monday. So if you use a hashtag on Monday and put Mentoring Monday and you tag me, I will retweet it every Monday until you find someone. Because I advocate for the people that I mentor. I have like this big list of people that I'm like, oh, you're looking for this? Oh, I got someone for you. And I do all sorts of things like that to advocate for people that are less well known, but who I know are awesome, right? And so who here's done their job more than 2 years in InfoSec? Yeah, you know enough to be a mentor. And I hope that all of us senior people will pick someone or someones that we can pass this information down to. Yeah. We need to bridge this gap. We need to.
Before we get on to the other one, I just like that one so much. If you're in this space and you've achieved some level of success in your career, please take personal responsibility. You owe it to the rest of the community to tow other people up. Yes. That's the only way.
I would just add to that especially if you're a white dude, can you do that? Because here's the thing, I'm constantly asked, what are you doing to get more women interested in yada yada? And I'm like, actually, all genders of humans are born curious. Some of us are discouraged from that curiosity. And I call it the lady tax. When you expect me to lift up the rest of my also underrepresented group, that takes away from my primary work. So of course I do it, but white dudes, step on up. But the thing about hiring, so I came from a non-traditional background in terms of even computer science. So I think that for me as a hiring manager, built a lot of empathy for looking for people with drive, grit, unspoiled curiosity, largely unspoiled curiosity, and the ability to work hard and learn, and giving those folks a shot. I love giving people stretch goals, so it's like, okay, you're interested in moving into security, you don't have, all of these things, but tell me about how you solved this problem that was a security, related problem. And you can begin to spot those kinds of qualities, in people. The other big tip is that your HR hiring processes are probably screening out and not even letting you see. That's HR they're trying to get in the way. But here's the thing, if you can, because I have an example where I was trying to hire for a community manager inside of Microsoft. All the resumes I was getting from outside candidates that HR was handing me were feds. It was like FBI, and I'm like, no. And I was like, can you stop sending me like law enforcement candidates for this job? And they were like, but they have 5 years of experience. And I was like, in arresting hackers, can we not? Because I'm not the right candidate. So get in with your HR department, make sure that they are not accidentally screening out, not just, sending you the wrong candidates completely, but screening out ones with that kind of potential, and spend some time talking to them about what you're really, really looking for, and how you are looking for non-traditional candidates as well.
Just to say one quick thing. One thing that's really helpful for that is just having a list of like optional, not even requirements, but just like, here's a bunch of things that people have done before that made them successful in this. Instead of saying like 5 years of this and 3 years of this or whatever, it's just like a list of attributes or experiences that you might have instead of something that's like a hard list.
I'm going to be off topic. If you asked a question, I have your candy for you. And I heard lunch is now.
Yeah, to close up the panel, just one for myself as someone who's literally hired hundreds of people for application security roles. I've actually never been able to tell any certification, whether they graduated from college in any degree, any skill, and how that correlates to on-the-job performance. There's only been one thing I've ever been to discern on what separates people who are good from the ones that are not so good, and it's grit. The ones that will grind it and learn and teach other people every moment of every single day. One thing you'll hear me say constantly, there's nothing in this space, especially application security, that's cerebrally really challenging. Like, we're not doing crypto here and strange things like that. We're doing input validation, output filtering, prepared statements, right? And if you're willing to put in the grind, you'll do very well. So look for the key people that are going to be relentless and want to learn all the time.
I think there's one more question. The black. Oh, no, you're just telling us we're going to hire you. See that guy in black? Hire him with the mustache. Go meet that guy. Hire him. He's got the grit.
Oh, he's got resumes and everything.
Okay, that's awesome. Good job.
All right. A round for our panelists, please. Thank you very much.